We'll then review the new methodology for measuring mhac performance and how that is going to impact hospitals financially. We're then going to walk through the mhac Excel workbook, discuss the reporting timelines, and show you how to use the calculation sheet that we sent out as well. Again, some of you will have heard parts of this last week, but we do have some new people who couldn't attend. I'm going to try to get through the presentation, though, quickly enough that we have plenty of time for reviewing the worksheet or the Excel workbook, the calculation sheet, and then any questions at the end. If you have problems during the webinar hearing me, please do let us know. You can type a message in the chat or, well, last week some of you were very creative of sending us emails during it. So however, if you have problems, let us know, okay? And then if you have clarifying questions while I'm going through the presentation, I'll try to pause and answer them. However, if I miss them, I'll definitely try to get back to them at the end if you still have that question. Okay, so first we're going to do go over the mhac program and its guiding principles. As you know, the mhac program uses a list of 65 potentially preventable complications. These PPCs, as we call them, are defined as harmful events such as accidental laceration during a procedure or negative outcomes such as hospital-acquired pneumonia that may result from the process of care and treatment rather than from the natural progression of disease. In order to code the PPCs accurately, the PPC logic relies on present on admission indicators in the claims or case mix data. The mhac program then links hospital performance with hospital payment by comparing the observed number of PPCs to the expected number of PPCs for each hospital. So as you know, the new mhac methodology came about because of the new all-payer model that started on January 1st. The new methodology was actually proposed by the MHA, vetted by our performance measurement work group and the HSCRC staff, and then was approved by the Commission in the April meeting. As the methodology was being developed, these were sort of the guiding principles that were considered. One, the new program had to help Maryland achieve the all-payer model goal of a 30% reduction in all 65 PPCs by the end of the 5-year demonstration, or by the end of 2018. As you may remember, the previous program didn't actually include all 65 PPCs and was more measured on the excess costs of PPCs rather than on the actual number. The new program also had to line up with other waiver requirements, and these include that the breadth and impact of the program has to meet or exceed the national Medicare program in terms of both the measures and the revenue at risk. In addition, the program has to improve care for all patients regardless of payer. And the new program, though, was still designed in a way to prioritize PPCs that are high volume, high cost, have opportunity for improvement, and are in areas of national focus. In addition, the new program had to have predetermined performance targets and financial impact. Again, this differs from the previous program where hospitals were ranked after the performance period ended to determine their penalties and rewards, and thus you wouldn't know the financial impact until the end of the year. We also wanted to encourage cooperation and sharing of best practices and hold hospitals harmless for lack of improvement if attainment is highly favorable, and give hospitals the ability to track progress. So again, the mhac workbook that we sent out, which actually this week you should have received the January through March preliminary data, that is us trying to give you a way of tracking progress throughout the calendar year 2014 performance period. So this table just compares the two programs. So here you can see this is the previous program, and this is the new program. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but again, you know, the old program was concerned with excess cost of PPCs over total revenue at risk. The new program is concerned with the observed to expected ratio. I would just keep this slide as a good reference for if anybody has questions about the new program compared to the old program. Again, before we get started or get any further into the presentation, I just wanted to remind everyone that we're reviewing the program that is going to impact rates in rate year 2016, which is fiscal year 2016. The base period will be calendar year 2013, and the base period will be used to set the benchmarks and thresholds, the scaling, and the norms. And then the performance period will be calendar year 2014. Okay. So first we're going to walk through the measurement methodology. We'll go through these following components of the methodology. And then, you know, during the presentation, you'll see these blue boxes, and that will just sort of reference when something is available on the mhac Excel workbook or on our website. Again, at the end of the presentation, I'll open up the Excel sheet and walk through it in more detail with you and answer any questions that you have on it. Okay, so again, the new program is based upon the observed to expected ratio for each PPC. And in order to calculate these expected numbers, we use norms that were based upon the 2013 data, and we look at it by APR, DRG, and severity of illness so that we can do risk adjustment. This hasn't changed from the previous program. However, we can answer any questions about how these expected values are calculated. And as you can see here, the norms files to calculate the expected values is available on the HSCRC website and is tab 5 of the mhac Excel workbook. So this slide goes over the adjustments or exclusions that are applied to the base period data so that we can improve measurement fairness and stability. So for calendar year 2013, for the state as a whole, we remove any cases where the APR DRG cell has less than 2 total cases. We remove palliative care cases and cases with more than 6 PPCs. These are sort of considered catastrophic cases that are generally outliers. Last week when I gave this presentation, it said we removed these for each hospital, and that was incorrect. It is at the state level that we make those case level removals. However, then for each hospital, we do exclude PPCs where the number of cases at risk is less than 10 or the number of expected cases is less than 1. So this means that not all hospitals will be measured for each of the 65 PPCs. And then I will show you on the next page the excluded PPC list that will tell you which hospitals have some PPCs excluded. I just want to note, because there were some questions about this after last week, that these adjustments are only applied to the calendar year 2013 base period. They aren't applied to the performance period. In part, this was done so that scores can be calculated during the performance year prior to knowing whether or not, for instance, a hospital will have more than 10 cases at risk or a number of greater than 1 expected. Also, we wouldn't be able to kind of track it on a monthly basis until we hit those thresholds. So again, that is why they are only applied to the base period. Okay, so this next slide just shows you a snapshot of what the excluded PPC list looks like. So as you can see here, for example, Meredith has 4 PPCs removed, 12, 26, 43, and 63. So that means, again, that they had either less than 10 cases at risk or less than 1 expected during the calendar year 2013 base period. And I will note up here in red it says that hospitals that have no excluded PPCs aren't actually on the list. In addition, you will be able to see the number of PPCs excluded or included for each hospital in the Excel workbook as well. So you could look at it there to confirm that yes, indeed, I had all 65 PPCs included. Okay, so the new methodology uses benchmarks and thresholds to assign points to hospitals for each PPC. This is similar to the way that the Maryland QBR and the Medicare VBP programs work. The threshold and benchmark values are calculated using the 2013 data. Also, however, we've added something called serious reportable events. And for these PPCs, the threshold and benchmark are 0. Now, these 5 serious reportable events, or sometimes we call them never events, were determined in collaboration with stakeholders, and they may change over time. For all other PPCs, the threshold is equal to the weighted mean of all the OE ratios, which actually comes out to equaling 1. And the benchmark is the weighted mean of the top quartile of OE ratios. Okay, so this is just a snapshot of the report that shows you the thresholds and the benchmarks for each PPC. So for stroke and intracranial hemorrhage, the threshold again is 1, and the benchmark is 0.6026. I also put on here one of the serious reportable events, PPC 30, so you can see that that is set at 0. And again, this is posted on the HSCRC website and is tab 2 of the mhac Excel workbook. Okay, so once you know the threshold and the benchmark for each PPC, you can calculate attainment and improvement points. This is done by comparing the hospital's observed to expected ratio to see whether it is higher or lower than the threshold and benchmark for attainment, and whether it's higher or lower than the previous year's performance for improvement. For each PPC, you can score up to 10 points, and as with the QBR program, it is actually for each PPC, the points you get are based on the higher of attainment or improvement points. So whichever one is better is what you get. So for attainment points, the number of points a hospital will receive is based on the range between the benchmark and threshold. And on the next slide, I'll show you the formula for how to calculate this. However, for hospitals whose performance period rate is equal to or above the benchmark, or below the benchmark, they will receive full attainment points. So again, in this case, lower numbers are better. So it should say below the benchmark here. I apologize. And then hospitals whose rates are above, again, I got this back, Crowlers, the threshold, they will receive 0 attainment points. All right, for improvement, the number of points is based on a scale between, the benchmark and how you did in the previous year. So this means if the performance rate is equal, again, this is backwards, is equal to or below the benchmark, you receive full improvement points. But if the hospital's rate is equal to or higher than the base period, then you'll receive 0 improvement points. Again, I will update the attainment part here on the slides and repost them onto the website. Okay, so this slide just shows the formulas, again, for how to calculate the partial points.
Allison, it's Diane. I want to just unmute someone who has a question real quick before it gets too far past the
Absolutely. No problem.
Thank you. It's Shiva Vanagapal. Vanagopal from Adventist, I think. Sheba, I've just unmuted you.
Thanks. My question actually was, when you were talking about the PPCs that get excluded when you have more than 6 PPCs on a case, you said it applied to the year 2013, which would be our base year. So my question was, when you calculate it for your actual performance and count the number of observed, do we still exclude cases with more than 6 PPCs, or do those get included in the observed?
You know, so I know the PPC-specific exclusions are only applied to the base year. I'm going to have to check. I think check on the statewide ones. I cannot. I'm trying to remember in the program. I don't remember what was previously done before, but we're going to be doing whatever was previously done before. So that may mean that they are excluded. Again, it's really the PPC specific.
I think that's, Allison, I'm sorry. I think you're correct. I think they're excluded.
Right. I think they are excluded. I think it's just the PPC specific ones. So that may mean, and we'll have to, again, we'll have to look at that to see whether or not that, I don't know that that's going to significantly impact the scores as we go throughout the year, but we may need to monitor that. We can look back at last year and see like what percentage of cases that removed.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is then if you have more than 6 PPCs on a case, they won't count towards your observed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Again, I apologize. I will double check that, and if the answer is different, I will make sure people are told, okay? Okay, great. I'm going to continue. Again, these are just the points formulas. I am going to double check them to make sure that they aren't backwards. I may have taken them from QBR where the higher score is better, so I apologize. And, you know, the formulas actually, though, are already embedded in the calculation sheet that we give you. So really, they're just here for your reference, but I will update the slides and repost them on the website if there's any changes.
Allison, there's another question from Tracy Davidson.
Okay.
Yes. For the same thing, is the was the palliative care also excluded at our level from our observed, the same as the 6 or more?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so those 3 exclusions are haven't changed this year. They were the same ones as we had in previous years, and I believe they are excluded from both the base year and performance year. I'll check on that, but they will not count for your observed.
Okay. And you had previously said that those couple exclusions were only at the state level and not the facility level.
Right. So really what I meant there, that mostly applies to the one where it's APR DRG cells of less than 2. So essentially, for the whole state and for each hospital, we remove all palliative care cases and all cases with greater than 6 PPCs. But when we look at whether or not they, to exclude them based on the numbers, we don't exclude for each hospital APR DRG cells with less than 2. It's at the statewide level. If we did that, there would be lots of hospitals don't have more than 2, and I mean it excludes a great deal of data. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. I'm going to continue here. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier in the guiding principles, the new mhac methodology wanted to have a way to weight PPCs differently, so more emphasis could be put on what we're calling target PPCs. Since reducing these target PPCs will contribute more to achieving the waiver goal. So there are 3 PPC tiers. Tier 1 are these target PPCs that are high volume, high cost, and have an opportunity for improvement. or are of a national focus. Tier 2 are those not on the target list, but those that have a high percentage attributed to Medicare and the PPCs that affect majority of hospitals. Tier 3 are all of the other PPCs. So these are ones that have low volume, they affect a low number of hospitals, and they include the obstetric-related PPCs. So Tier 1 is weighted at 100%. There are 20 Tier 1 PPCs. Tier 2 is weighted at 60%. There are 9. And Tier 3 is weighted at 40%, and there are 36 PPCs. Again, these were established through consulting with stakeholders, and both in PPCs in each tier and the weights could change over time. So this slide then tells you how to calculate a hospital's final score. You essentially take the number of points that somebody scores in Tier 1. So, all 20 PPCs, you could score a maximum of 200 points, 10 times 20. So you take the number of points they score in Tier 1 and you multiply it by the weight, which for Tier 1 is 100%, so it's just 1. And then you take the denominator and multiply it by the weight. You do that then for each, and you just add it up to get the final score. Again, I'll show you this. The formulas are built into the calculation sheet, and I'll show you the tabs on the workbook that have the formulas as well, and show you how the scores are calculated. Okay, so I'm actually going to pause there. I have difficulty seeing the questions on my screen, but I want to see if there are any questions before I move on to how these scores impact hospitals financially. Diane, are there any questions? Okay. Obviously, if there are any questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer them on the methodology.
I'm sorry, I was muted. No, I don't see any questions, Allison.
Very good. I can see the questions. This is our IT guy. It's just that they're kind of all scrunched up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the financial impact of mhac performance. Okay, so for rate year 2016, the Commission voted for the following scaling parameters. First, for calendar year 2014 performance, they set a statewide mhac minimum improvement target of an 8% reduction. If we achieve the 8% reduction, if we don't achieve the 8% reduction, the maximum revenue at risk will be 4% of inpatient revenue. However, if we do achieve the 8% reduction, the maximum revenue at risk will be 1% of permanent inpatient revenue, and there will be rewards to hospitals with a score of greater than 0.6 up to 1% of revenue, provided there are sufficient funds collected through penalties. And there is also a statewide total penalty limit of 0.5% of revenue. What this means is that if many hospitals did poorly and there was a large amount of revenue that could be collected in penalties, in total, the amount collected wouldn't exceed 0.5% for the state, and it would be done by reducing each hospital's penalty a certain amount so that we came under that 0.5%. Okay, so to actually figure out what percent of revenue you are going to have in penalties or rewards, we use the final scores that were calculated from calendar year 2013, attainment only, not improvement, and we calculate a scale that has preset, that's preset from the minimum score to the maximum score from calendar year 2013. Now, it's actually two scales. One is for if we meet or exceed the 8% target, and one is if we don't. And I'll show you this now. So, again, I'm sorry, this is probably small on your screen. But what I'm wanting you to see is there's actually two columns. One is for, again, if we don't meet the minimum target, and one is if we do. And what the scale allows you to do is for a hospital to see what percent of revenue would be calculated, what percent of revenue would be at risk for penalties or rewards based upon a certain score. For instance, if a hospital was going to, score 0.46, they could, or 47, they could look at their score here, and they could then estimate. They could see, okay, 0.47% of revenue will be at risk if the state as a whole doesn't meet the 8% target. But if we do, 0% would be at risk. So these penalties at risk, it starts at 4% under the worst scenario and 1% under the better scenario. And as scores go up, the percentage of penalties goes down until you hit the penalty threshold. So the penalty threshold is where above that point there will be no penalty. So it's shown here in peach. It's 0.51 under the scenario where we don't hit the minimum target, and 0.46 and above if we do hit the minimum target as a state. So also you can see the section in green down here, and that's where where rewards. That tells you how much percent of a reward you will get as long as we collect sufficient money in penalties. Okay, so again, we did the preset scaling. It's based on the calendar year 2013 attainment scores only. The scale ranges from 0.07 to 0.8, and we try to encourage both cooperation and sharing of best practices by having two separate scales and setting the thresholds differently for those scales. And again, I can answer, maybe I'll pause here and see if there are any questions, Diane, before I go to the next slide. Okay. Again.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, yes, there's one question from Chris Cobb. Now, Chris doesn't have their audio pin activated. Let me see if I can pull out.
Is this at Johns Hopkins Health System? Is that the question, Carly?
I am.
Open up.
Yeah, my questions tab has been.
All right. Well. Okay. I'm getting my IT person has expanded my window, so now I can see the questions. Okay. So there is a question from Johns Hopkins about what version of the grouping software. What version of the core grouping software are you using? Okay, so the version of the software that we're using is listed on the Excel workbook, and it is version 31. Okay? All right, I'm going to continue then. So one of the next part, the next slide, okay, the next slide though, so we've just told you that there are two different scales. So in order for you guys to monitor, or for us to help you monitor where we are, whether or not as a state as a whole we're going to meet that 8% reduction, we then use the formula here to calculate the percent improvement. And again, this is part of the mhac workbook, and I'll show you when we open that in a few seconds. Okay? All right, so all right. So next I'm going to open up the Excel workbook. I have here the file name is January to February. However, earlier this week we sent out the March data, so I'm actually going to show that to you. Okay? open up. So now I'm opening up the webinar. This is, again, January through March. This is the workbook you should have received from Elsa Haile earlier this week. When you open it up, you can go to the cover sheet, and you will see just, again, an overview. I'm trying to get rid of this pointer. No, that's not doing it. All right, an overview of the which of the rate year 2016 data, what we use, and the PPC and APR version of the software. And then it tells you what is included in this book. And I'll just walk you through it quickly. So the second tab here, I showed you this before. It just shows you for each PPC what the threshold and the benchmark are. Ignore that. I apologize. I have to figure out how to get rid of that. I apologize. Okay. Then this third tab here is, again, the scaling, and that shows you the percent of revenue at risk. So, you know, any score that you have, you can just kind of come here and you can look and see what the percent will be in penalties or in rewards. Next, you have the excluded PPCs. We went over that already. This fifth tab is the PPC norms, and this shows you by APR, DRG, and severity of illness category what percentage of at-risk cases are expected to have each PPC. So previously and currently, hospitals can use this sheet to calculate their expected values themselves if they would like to. So probably the sheets that is of most interest, though, are the preliminary results. So these, again, are the results for January, February, and March. This first tab is results for each hospital for each PPC. So again, I'll just walk through this quickly. Column A and B just tell you which hospital it is. Tab C and D tell you which PPC. Tab E here tells you which tier that PPC is in. So for instance, stroke is in PPC tier 3, which means that it's only weighted at 40%. So, and then here, column F and column G are the threshold and the benchmark for the PPC. These next 4 columns, and I'll highlight them here, bright yellow. These are your base year information. So this tells you that in calendar year 2013, for this PPC, the hospital had over 13,000 cases. They had 8 observed cases of the PPC. They had 12 expected, so their ratio is 0.66. So these next 4 columns then are the preliminary data for calendar year 2014. So here you can see just January through March, the hospital had about over 3,452 cases at risk. They had 3 PPCs actually occur, and they were expected, though, to have 3.15. So their ratio is 0.94. So based on these results, we then assign the achievement and the improvement points. So to do that, we compare here the observed to expected ratio of 0.94 to the benchmark. So it is higher than the benchmark. However, it's less than 1, which is the threshold, so they do score 2 achievement points. You also, if you compare this ratio to how they did in calendar year 2013, you can see that they're doing worse at this point, so they get 0 improvement points. And then here, for final points, it is the better, again, of the achievement or improvement points. Okay? Now, this next tab here goes through then the final scores for each hospital. So again, it shows you, the name of the hospital and how many PPCs were included for that hospital. So remember, Meredith had 4 excluded, so they have 61 PPCs included. Then you can see here just, their points that they scored for Tier 1. You can see they had all 20 PPCs in Tier 1, so their denominator, again, is 200. That's 10 times 20. And then we have that for Tier 2 and Tier 3. And then if you scroll over, you end up then with these are the final weighted points. And that, again, would be calculated by applying the weights. And I apologize, in the February version of this that we sent out, we did this in Excel, but this version right now is actually just outputting directly from SAS. In the future, we'll be making sure we send it out so that this calculation is done in the worksheet so you can actually see it. Okay, so this then would tell you, essentially, you would take the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 points and times them by the weight and then add them up to get the total of points that you scored, your total denominator, and then your final score. Okay? You could then, again, take that final score, like 0.63, go back to this sheet here, 0.73, and, see that, okay, if that is their final score, let's say at the end of the year, they'd either have 0% penalties or they may even get 0.63% in rewards. Okay, so then to be able to tell, whether or not the state as a whole is improving, this last tab shows you that. It shows it to you actually by hospital. So here for Meredith, and I apologize for picking on you, you will see they've actually had a 45% improvement. So they have a lower risk-adjusted rate of PPCs in the performance period compared to what they had in calendar year 2013. And then if you scroll down to the bottom here, it will actually show it to you for the state as a whole. So we're currently using preliminary data as the state as a whole has actually had a 1% reduction in PPCs. Again, this is preliminary. Hospitals will get the case level files and be able to make any corrections to their coding, and then we will get those results and the rates may actually change. Okay, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to open back up the presentation. Again, this is what's in the Excel workbook. These first few tabs are based on the calendar year base period data. The 3 tabs at the end are the preliminary performance period data. And the plan going forward, starting with the data that will be submitted in May, is that we will give you monthly preliminary results and case level reports, and this will be around within 28 days after the end of the previous month, right, end of the month. So, this month we were delayed getting you out March data, but when we get out the data in May, which will include preliminary data for April, we should have it out by the 28th. We also will be getting quarterly final results from hospitals. Those are due 60 days after the end of the quarter. We will then run quarterly final reports and provide those to you 75 days after the end of the previous quarter. And then for final results, it would also be about 75 days after the end of the full performance period. So next, what I'm going to do, are there any questions before I go on about the reporting timelines or about what's included in the reporting sheet?
Allison, this is a bit of a delay again. Just if we could review the formula on slide 23, Robin Emmerich had a question. You're unmuted.
Questions.
Let me go back to the slide.
I just wanted to know that is that formula correct?
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty. 1 second.
Robin says she can follow up after the presentation, if that would be better.
Okay, well, let me just go to slide 23. I'd be happy to look at it again. There are, and for some reason I'm not understanding. My slides aren't advancing. I don't know if you guys can see them. All right, now I've figured it out. All right, so if I go back to slide 23, I'll double check if there's an error in the calculation, and if you want, I mean, there are different ways of calculating the improvement, as well as actually the final scores, and we can talk about it. And if there is an error, I will make the correction and let everyone know. Okay. Okay. So next, we have provided to hospitals a calculation sheet in Excel, and we've actually posted this online as well. And I'm going to walk through this quickly. All right, so next I'm going to open up the calculation sheet. So this was also sent out to all the hospitals, and what this allows you to do is to calculate your scores or potentially calculate what your scores might be under different scenarios. Because we didn't make a sheet for each hospital, there's actually no data here in the base year, calendar year 2013, the observed, the expected, or the at-risk. You can use what we've sent out in the mhac workbook, and you can copy and insert that in here. Now, the calculation sheet is set up so that the PPCs are grouped in terms of their tiers. So we got Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. The ones that are highlighted in yellow are those serious reportable events or never events, and they're in yellow because the formulas vary for those. So now what I'm going to do is just show you a sheet where I've already inserted data. So again, what you can do, each hospital can insert their observed and their expected. They can insert in their base year 2013 data. And then for the performance period, you can insert what we provide, or you could insert what you calculate on your own, or you could insert hypothetical scenarios, and it will go ahead and calculate points for you. So again, it'll calculate attainment or achievement points. The formula is embedded into the Excel workbook. It'll calculate improvement points, and then the better of the two of those. Then it will come down here, and here on row 25, it subtotals all of Tier 1. Then you've got the subtotal for Tier 2. And if you scroll down to the way bottom, you then got the total weighted score. So based upon these results, this hospital would score 0.46. So again, I'm just going to, let's say we go back up here and we know what they scored. Let's say that, well, instead of having 7 observed, this hospital actually had only 2 observed. If you insert that, you're going to see the ratio changes. Now their number of points will change. And if you go to the bottom, you're going to see that their score changed. So their score actually went up, which I'm not sure that makes sense with what I just had, but I'll double check that because I think that they scored better. But we'll check that and make sure it's correct, and if needed, send out a new copy. Anyway, hopefully this calculation sheet will be of use to you. The formulas, while they're embedded, could be, overwritten or deleted. So if you have any problems with your sheet calculating your score correctly, I encourage you to download a new one from the website. Okay. So with that, I've actually finished my part of the presentation. I just want to thank the MHA and other stakeholders in the hospital industry for all their work in helping us develop this new methodology. Again, we can take questions now, or you can email questions to us at a later date if you have them. Okay, so I'm seeing some questions here from Steve Davidson. Diane, can you unmute her, or am I doing that?
I can do that. There you go.
My question is on the case file, because you had said the V66.7 cases do not count. When you get the case file, anybody listed on the case file are those ones that you identified as having a PPC for that time frame, correct?
Correct. I need to check about whether or not, though, we are applying the greater than 6 appropriately in the preliminary data. It may be that because we applied it only to the base year, we may have not applied it here. I have to check that.
Okay, because I had some discrepancies between what you reported and what we're identifying, and some of those discrepancies were because of someone receiving palliative care or who had 6 or more PPCs. Okay.
All right. So again, you know, my apologies. I know we thought through the PPC level ones. We may not have applied the previous exclusions consistently, but we will look at that and then make a decision on how we will handle that.
Okay. So if they are excluded and you make the decision on how to handle that, they're still going to show up on our report?
Are you talking about case level files?
Yeah.
Diane, I'm going to Elsa is not here today, or isn't here right now. She's the one that sent out the case level files. I will check with her and get back to everybody on that.
The case level files includes everyone in the denominator and everyone in the numerator. So even if we decided to exclude those with greater than 6, that you could still see them in the case level file because it includes everyone in the denominator.
Well, but they're not included in the ultimately they're not included in the measure, but I think they are included in the case level file because we wanted you guys to be able to see all your cases.
Okay, right, that makes sense.
So okay, so we do see all of our cases, I understand that, but across the top it says PPC 1, 2, 3, all the way up through the numbers. So under PPC 1, I reorganized the file so I can move them all up to the top. But I see 5 patients identified from your level as having that PPC. Am I reading it correctly?
So I don't have the case level file in front of me and because I don't receive it because it's case level. It's got the case level data and Elsa doesn't send it to me, so I apologize. I actually don't know what the columns even look like. Okay, so your question is you're seeing people with 6 or more PPCs that are included.
And also people with palliative care diagnosis codes that are high enough in the sequence to be sent to your facility.
Okay. Okay, so again, it may be that we hadn't applied those exclusions, and we'll look back at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Every time I look at it, I apologize. I realize how I just I missed it. Hey, other questions?
Kathy Talbot had her hand raised, but I tried to unmute, and there was a lot of residual noise. So, Kathy, I'm going to, here, I see your hand raised again. Let me do that. Okay, Kathy, you're unmuted on your computer microphone.
Can you hear me?
Barely.
Okay, I've already had my question answered, so.
Oh, great.
I tried to lower my hand.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much for bearing with us on this. Thanks.
Okay. I'm scrolling through to see if anybody else has their hand up, or you can also type questions, or we can unmute you.
Tracy, you just put your hand up. Tracy Davidson?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Don't be sorry. I'm glad that we're finally figuring out how to use the software better.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little confusing, but it'll get there.
Okay.
My question to you was, on the expected values that show up, say we got the January through March preliminary information. So the expected value, really, if we took that and multiplied it by 4, we should come up with our annual expected value for that number, correct?
Not exactly, because it may be, I went through this with somebody else this last week. It may be a good approximation. However, what we do is we take the norms and we apply them to the number of at-risk cases, which may not be constant over each quarter. It may be, but it may be that during certain quarters you have a higher number of at-risk. And so, you know, you could use it as a guide, but it's not exactly that you can multiply it by 4 to get your annual.
So the only way we would be able to do that is if we ran our severity of illness for all those diagnosis codes and plugged them in. That's the only way we would, on this end, without having the report in front of us, be able to do that, correct?
So we can't calculate the actual number of expected until we know the number at risk, right? So it's hard to calculate totally into the future. However, you guys will have access and could run your APR DRGs prior to, let's say, submitting data to us, and then apply the norms to calculate an expected for yourself.
Okay, but like you said, in May, this is going to come out monthly anyway.
Right, exactly. So then in May, you will know how many, you know, over time, you're going to know how many expected you have. And maybe in future years, we'll start to know, you know, sort of whether or not those expected numbers vary significantly by month, whether you can just multiply it by 12 or by each quarter. However, when I looked at one hospital's data, they ended up with not as many cases as they actually had in 2013, if you did that.
I could see taking the severity of illness where that would occur.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So again, I'll pause. You know, if you don't have questions, you know, or have questions later on, I'd be happy to either talk to anybody by phone or, you know, you're always welcome to send the questions. If you, here you can see this is our quality mailbox, and if you send questions there, Elsa, Diane, and I will receive them, and we will reply.
I don't see any other hands raised or questions at this point, Allison.
Okay. So again, there are a few things on my list to check. One, I'm going to change the information on the attainment slide to make it say that if it's lower than the benchmark. I'll also, obviously, the biggest thing is to check on the exclusions and how they're dealt with in the performance tier. I will make sure that we get back to that, and if anybody else has anything else that they think of or that they see that they're think there may be an issue or just want clarification on, I appreciate you getting in touch. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you again. I will remind you there is a recorded version on the website, and we will also possibly be recording, or we've recorded this one, we'll be posting that as well. Thank you again. I appreciate everybody attending, and I look forward to working with you over the coming year on the mhac program.